Okay, we are going to start again. And first of all, Professor Mantovani, I want to congratulate, and I will be very pleased that the person should come here to explain, because the one of you that clearly pick up the mistake. And so I really would like to welcome the person. I don't know who is. He's not in the room? Not yet? Chi ha scoperto l'errore? So we are waiting for the clever person that pick up the mistake of probably left the room after the discovery. Lo riconosci tu, Alberto? So we are waiting for the winner of the Mistake Award. In bagno. Okay. So we're waiting for him, don't worry. Okay. So maybe we'll do at the end of the... Okay, so I'm very pleased now to start the second part of the morning with another very important keynote speaker, who is Professor Giuseppe Citerio. I'm very pleased that Giuseppe accepted to be here today for several reasons. Well, first of all, is because not because Professor Mantovani is not a doctor, but Giuseppe Citerio is a real doctor because he's the head of the ICU neuroscience intensive care. I'm always very fascinated of the people working in the ICU because you see, for all the aspects in medicine that's been so complicated for me, they managing in a very easy manner. So everything, so very impressive. The second thing is because he's director of the Department of Neuroscience. And as you know, probably, in addition to do immunology research, if you have to select something, neuroscience is probably one of the most fascinating fields. And I have to say, at this time, probably one of the incredible field of research for the power of technology that is making this fantastic organ of our life, the most important probably, to be explored. The third reason is because he's the editor-in-chief of probably the highest ranked journal in intensive care medicine. I said before in neurology, neuroscience, and he told me, Andrea, that was a mistake. And I apologize for that, but he's the editor-in-chief. And becoming editor-in-chief in a journal, which is one of the highest rank in the field, it's implied that you are a good scientist, you are a medical doctor, you are a very good medical doctor, otherwise it's unlikely that the editor will ask you to become the editor-in-chief of a very important journal. And they said the highest journal in the field. Giuseppe Citerio will, I don't want to say more about the scientific because I'm sure for the talk he will give to us, he will provide from the time he was born, so it's a very long track. Is the person, no, with the white? Oh, you are the winner. You don't know that. You answered the question. You found a mistake, so you are the mistake winner, and you will receive a special award. But in order to receive the award, you have to come here and explain what is the mistake. Please. So there is no surprise, so you have just to say what is the mistake.
I think that there should have also been acute inflammation because COVID-19 was a demonstration of that for the entire, I mean, instead of only chronic inflammation, also acute inflammation.
So that was a mistake. You're right. And you pick up very well. So there is no prize, but you have the mistake award of the day, okay? Congratulations. So finally, Giuseppe will provide to us a talk which is entitled To be a clinician scientist editor, what it takes and what it offers, my personal atypical journey. It's very atypical. He will tell us when he was born, so that's Giuseppe.
Thank you, Andrea, for teasing me and for this kind introduction. And I think I made an error since the beginning. I answered yes to a mail from Licia. She said to me, come to the Virgilio day. I say, okay, I will come. And then I'm here talking to you. And I think my talk would like to be more inspirational for you. I will not discuss so much about science. I will touch also science. But I will not speak only about science. So starting my talk, I think we will discuss, Andrea said me, you are starting discussing when you were born, yes. Something about my life, my clinical path, my experience like a researcher. I didn't have experience that Andrea had, starting with clinics, lab, returning back to the clinic. I stayed in the clinics, and as journal editor. As human being, if you look my business card, Andrea already presented you, I am a doctor, I work in a neurocritical care environment, I am an editor-in-chief of a journal. But if you look on the other side of my business card, I have a family, so one of the main messages for you that are young, you need to think about your life, you need to have your passion. I like to go by bike, I like to go to the sea, walking around the mountains. And this is an editorial from Lancet, because we publish a couple of papers on Lancet. We want to make a profile about me, and we discuss a while. What are your passions? What do you want to do? And the title is Giuseppe Citerio Neurocucina. It means that I'm cooking every day for my family. I cook for my friends. I made a lot of errors while I'm cooking because I don't follow the recipes. I do myself my recipes. And the editorial says it's a little bit hard to tell where his cooking ends and his medicine begins. And they thought that the creativity reaching from the cuisine was part of my job. So you have to follow your passion. And I think you need to spare time for your passion outside the work. I like to cycle. And I go by bike every weekend if I can, also during the evening if I can. And he said to me, Andrea was teasing me, that I was starting when I was young. This is a photo of myself when I was probably 3. And I was thinking to be an astronaut because at that time people went to the moon. We are close to moon, so I wanted to drive a Formula 1 car. I want to be a football player, but I was the worst football player ever. I succeeded in doing the last part of this cartoon. I was a DJ when I was young. So I succeeded only partially in my young dreams. And then I was looking at my father study. He was a doctor, studying in the evening in the garden, looking at the B&J, another journal. And I say, I would like to go on my motor bicycle. I don't want to study during the evenings. I will never do it. So I was uncertain about my career, and around your age I was uncertain becoming an engineer or a doctor. And my actual wife is still remembering me that I, in the middle of the street between the two faculties, and I was uncertain that which one to pick up, to become, an engineer or a doctor, because I loved also technicalities. I was one of the first, my of my friend group having a computer. When I was young, I was typing the thesis for others. So I was addicted to tech since I was young. And I remember the first paper I downloaded from my house from PubMed was around 1992. It took 25 minutes for having the abstract, and I think I was a genius, having an abstract of a paper at home in 1992, and I say, I'm very smart. And I think I wasn't so smart at that time. And thinking about my clinician life, I became a doctor. I put here some sentences of big doctors, and I think there are a couple of elements in these sentences. You need to be curious. You will take care of the humanity, and you will take care of people that need you because they have a clinical problem, and they come to you for having the clinical problem solved. And so this is your mission, and probably being an engineer, you can build a beautiful house, beautiful computers, but you will help also the life of the people, but you will not change the health life of the people. And I started with anesthesia because I was technical addicted, and I wasn't so good at school. And anesthesia is like driving a plane, because people come in the operating room, they rely on you, they fall asleep when you use drugs, you manage parameters, and you wake up the people at the end of the surgery. And you need to be successful because the people want to return back as he or she was before the surgery. It's like a plane, and you can have turbulence, bleeding, the surgery is making a bleeding in the OR, and you have to control the situation if you have to return back. But I think that wasn't enough. I wasn't so satisfied. And at that time, for anesthesiology intensive care people, there wasn't a PhD program, and Andrea, in his track, as a couple of anesthesiologists became PhD in the last few years, but we are talking about the previous century, 1991, 92, something like that. They decide to upgrade. I like Formula One, I want to enter in the Formula One, and Formula One is intensive care, because it's expensive, it's fast, you need to solve a problem in a while, and it's like a pit stop for your patient. They have a lot of problems. There are a lot of engineers working on their healthy status, but when the engine is broken, they come to the pit stop. And you have a couple of hours for fixing the problem, is what Andrea was saying. And technology is an essential part of the work in intensive care. But I learned that it's not only technology, and we will see in a while. 99% of the people starting intensive care in the 80s, in the 90s, were following the Luciano Gattinoni path. He was involved in extracorporeal support and in mechanical ventilation. So 99% of people was interested in mechanical ventilation and lung injury. My wife too, so she did a career in that setting. I decided to take care of the people with a problem, acute neurological problem. They were not cured at the time in intensive care. If we did enter in the 90s an intensive care environment with a neuro problem, traumatic brain injury, subarachnoid hemorrhage, you were going to die because nobody knows what to do. And I think that this minority, around 20%, 30% of a general intensive care unit patient, needs to have a cure, needs to be taken care of, and I was interested in them because they were the minority and nobody was taking care of them. So it was exciting because we saved a lot of life, but I realized that being a doctor is not only technique, is not only being fast, is not only doing surgery, but also talking with the families. So you need to have humanities. You need to discuss with family things like organ donation. And Andrea, we have some difficult talks with families of young children coming in my unit with a hematological problem where they are going to die. So Andrea and myself, we need to have this conversation with the family because it's the end of the story. But most of the time, not be sad, most of the time the things go positively in our work. And I think I learned some lesson being a clinician. The first one, to be curious. because curiosity is part of our life. I don't see so much curiosity in my residents sometimes, and I push them to try to answer the question, why? Why did happen this to the patient? Why you did this maneuver? Why we were able to solve the problem? And I think you need to study. You need to put yourself in the difficult situation of having a question you are not able to answer. And you need to think about your career. I was thinking to take care of a neuro patient, and I wanted to succeed in that. And this is my path. It doesn't matter. I was a young colleague, and I only want to say that in 1993, I was 33 years old. I was the only one knowing something neuro from 3 years in the unit where I'm working. So nobody knows anything about neuro. And I start also to make research on neuro. These are the track of my publication. Doesn't matter the number, but means that I grow up over time because I didn't have a lot of people working in the field at the beginning. And I developed a couple of successful educational tracks, like the Summer School of Neurocritical Care, in which we invite people from all over the world. We have people coming from all over the world, teachers from all over the world, and we have a successful track. But also we need to communicate the success with books, with other things, but also to be the victim of my teaching activities, because this is a lot of students did echography on my brain, and they were surprised to see some cerebral blood flow remaining. So I'm happy about it, because I was worried the first time they started to put a probe on myself. So I say, I don't know what is the result. As Andrea said, probably you need, and the Virgilio problem is a unique opportunity to do it, to seek for a mentor, to someone older than you that will guide you through the lab, through the clinical field. This is Nino Stocchetti, a friend of mine. We have only 10 years difference, but he's the only one at that time was interested in the setting, and was the second one interested in neurointensive care in Italy in the 90s. And I think the recipe that I bring from my cuisine is that you need to have passion. Whatever you want, you can be a pediatrician, you can work with Alberto Mantovani, you can be whatever, the best surgeon in the world, but you need to put everything of you in your work. And don't be worried about the change. I started as an intensive anesthesiologist and a general intensivist. I became a neurointensive care because I follow my passion. And now I manage a journal, as Andrea said. So open to the changes. And for example, I became a professor in intensive care only when I was 52 or 53, something like that. I was a clinician since that time. But even if I was a clinician, I was able to follow the advancement of my field. So you need to be updated. You need to know the guidelines, the new findings, and when you become older, you will be part of the group that will write the guidelines and the new findings. And I think we need to be realistic. We need to look at ourselves, the environment where you live, and the target we can reach. Another important point is to join professional organizations. These are two professional organizations I worked with. Why? Because you will meet a lot of colleagues, like in the Virgilio program. You will discuss with them. You can build up a relationship. We can work together. And being a part of a minority, the neurointensive care, following my path, I was responsible of the Congress of all the society, and I was responsible of the scientific affair of the European Society of Intensive Care, for example. But I didn't want to run as president because for me it wasn't the job I liked. So follow your passion and continue your education all over your career. I'm looking now with different eyes my father, because he was taking care of a patient, and I was teasing him when he was studying. Sorry about that. The Virgilio program is a unique occasion. Stay connected to the other. You are not alone. I have a small group working with me. My strength is to be connected with others outside my group. These are 1,000 people that co-authored with me in the last 10, 15 years. 1,000 people. And every group, you can see in the groups that work with me and work with. So I'm not alone, even if I don't have a big research group. Be connected is important, is crucial today. And you need to love what you do, because if you don't love what to do, change your work. If you don't like to be a doctor, become an engineer afterwards, doesn't matter. But don't do a work you don't like. It's more applicable to the USA world where people work very hard compared to my resident. Think also of your well-being. Take a breath, eat, take a nap when it's needed, but I think this is important. And I would like to say that it's not so easy. Life is not easy. You will fail a lot. I failed a lot. But how can you survive after the failure? I think you need to find inside yourself the direction, and inside your network, your family, your values, your aims will help you to pass through something that is not going positively. I will show in a while something scientific in which we succeed to be founded, but we fail before we succeed 10 times at least. And resilience is the key word I would like to give you. Thinking about me as clinical researcher, I think that I found it today, because I'm looking at the journal every early morning. It's been published online yesterday on the JAMA, is medical ethics of the World Medical Association, and I think the duty to the society, one of the duties of a society, I think the number 34 or something like that, is that the physician must support sound medical scientific research. It's something that is part of your job, even if you are a simple clinician working in a hospital, but is part of our duties to proceed. And the other point, when I was looking at the slide presented by Alberto, I thought, I don't understand anything. And if I come in the lab of Alberto today, as Andrea was saying about macrophages and the ovarian tumor he was discussing before, you don't know anything. And sometimes you feel stupid. And I think that a productive stupidity is part of the job, because you discover things that you don't know. Because if you discover things you already know, you are not doing anything. You are not promoting science. And all the pathways presented by Alberto probably were not known by Alberto 15 years ago. And he had a good idea. He started to follow a path. And the curiosity, translating information from the clinical field to the lab or the other way around, produce this productive stupidity. I was focused on traumatic brain injury for at least 30 years. And so we published these two commissions on the Lancet, one in 2017, the other one 2 weeks ago, on TBI. Are 50 pages in which we put everything we know about TBI. But the reality is that we are not so able to cure the patient, but we are able to fix some problem, intracranial pressure, hematoma, and so on. And we are not changing the direction of the disease. So we were founded by the EU for collecting many information on 5,000 patients and 20,000 patients in the registry, because the idea was to build up a more precise medicine, as Alberto presented you about the tumors. We are not there with TBI. We collected blood sample, CT scan, all the clinical data, and we are defining phenotyping and genotyping of this population. Because we want to have a better treatment, because we want to have an improved health in this setting. But today we failed because we use comparative effectiveness. We do a lot of job. We know which is best or worse compared to not repairing, but avoiding additional damage, not repairing. And so we started to think out of the box, and here comes the lab. I developed with Elisa Zanier. She was an anesthesiologist. Now she's a scientist working at Mario Negri Institute. And we were together in the clinical side. She moved to the lab, and we started to think about to promote reparation of the brain after TBI. And so after many years in her lab, she was able to understand that microglia, for example, is able to produce toxic inflammation, but near of the contusion, for example, there are some protective inflammation fighting against this negative toxic inflammation. And if we think at the typical story of my patient, there is an hematoma evolving, the red is bad, so there is some injury coming in the normal tissue, and there are some reparative pathway coming outside the lesion, coming inside the lesion. And so we think in this way. Why? Don't boost, don't improve this reparative pathway. And why we can boost the endogenous reparative pathway. And so we start thinking about model, and we have some clinical model, not clinical model, but our patient. This is a tractography in patient in our units, and as you can see, there is a loss of connection of the white matter over time. So patients have a long-term disability. This is what I would like to fight and to correct. And in the lab, we were able to see that when we produce the damage progresses over time. And if we look at the thickness of the cortical part and the white matter part, here is the white matter part, we are losing also part of the brain contralaterally. So the damage diffuse, and we, for example, have the deposition of toxic substances also in the other part of the brain. And in patient with autopsy, we see there is a permanent, persistent inflammation. Think about the football player in the USA. There is a lot of research on it because repetitive damage produces a lot of inflammation. We did it also in the lab, and we see that also in animal there is the progression of the inflammation. And we saw also 1 year after a TBI in the lab to have a lot of microgliosis, a lot of contralateral pathology we are not expecting. So the damage becomes a chronic disease because we have an acute disease, TBI, traumatic brain injury, that becomes over time chronic. And so we try to think about how to protect, how to repair. And Elisa was in the lab, she started to talk to me about stem cells. You probably know better than me what stem cells are totipotent cells that develop in organs or maintain the tissue homeostasis. And we were focused on bone marrow, and we tested also umbilical cord stem cells. And if you look at the story, from bone marrow has been identified this kind of cell in 1970. The first evidence in the lab was in 2001 in an experimental TBI in the chronic phase. And the first treatment, and Andrea knows better than me, graft versus host disease was the first treatment in which we use this kind of cells. And we start to think about having a model. 2018, I was able to get funded by the region, Lombardia region, for having in the lab a study on mesenchymal cell coming from the factory that Andrea is a leader of, and we brought umbilical cell, mesenchymal cell, and from bone marrow cells in the lab in an experimental, in xenotransplant. And as you can see, there is a damage, there is a loss of sensory activity, cognitive defects, and anatomical damage. In red, you see the animal treated intracranically with this kind of cell. But also we want to see the two sources. We are founding to make a comparison between the two sources, and we will see that both sources were similar in the effect. Then Andrea comes in and say, why don't think about immunosuppression, because we are giving to an animal a cell coming from another species. And so we did the experiment. I don't go in deep detail. Without immunosuppression, we were able to have the same results. So it comes interesting for the clinician not having the need of immunosuppression, and the effect in the tissue, in the vessel, was similar. And so we start to think about using mesenchymal stromal cell for stimulating neurogenesis. We didn't know why. Repair the tissue and work on the glia scar, reducing it, and thinking about also some immunomodulatory property that we were not able to develop, to study at the beginning. Then we were looking at the two phenotypes we have from microglial, and we were able to promote the beneficial phenotype of this kind of cell. So we were inducing neuroreparation, we were inducing a positive balance in the fight between negative forces and positive forces of inflammation. And I don't go in deep detail, but we succeeded in it. Then we say, how can we bring this to the clinics? Because I don't want to insert a cell or group of cells inside the brain of my patient. They will move a little bit, they will reach the lesion point, but how can do it? And no, I will skip it for sake of time, but it is the same concept. And we start to use it intravenously. And we were surprised that we were able to see the same effect. Because the same effect is mediated probably, and we measure them, by soluble factors, not the cell by itself, but what the cell is liberating in the bloodstream that reach the damaged area. So we are open the field for trying to repair, and we, before going to clinic, we make a meta-analysis of all the study on this kind of cells, and we were able to see that there is always a neurological improvement over time. There are better neurological assessment, better cognitive deficit. This animal is not patient, but is a cartoon here, and the contusion volume is smaller. And every source, this is timing, this is delivery route, IV is the most frequent, and the model and the species. This effect could be repeated in many species in many ways. So we decide to start a clinical trial, and this is the way you fail, because I applied for, Andrea knows, 4 or 5 times, and it has not been founded. We found to have a very good idea, but the government, the healthy system didn't found us. So I changed the perspective, and I apply, and Andrea will laugh, to a track called rare disease, because the long-term outcome, negative outcome, is not so common. And the other point is that I applied as orphan disease, because I don't have any cure for the disease. And we succeeded. So you have a good idea, you go in the wrong direction, change your perspective, probably you can succeed. And we have been found in 1.2 million something for doing a phase 1-2 trial in humans with this team, Andrea, Tettamanti, Negri, Bergamo, Policlinico, and my unit. So we will go in clinic with these 3 units and with the support of this group. And we will see if they are safe and if there is any efficacy on biomarker, on MRI, and other setting, because it's a phase 2, we will not have a large population. We are talking about 60 patients. The last point I would like to touch is to be a journal editor. And I started in 1992 as a reviewer. I became associated editor for neuro because there wasn't nobody doing neuro in Europe at that time, and I was one of the only doing neuro. Then I worked a little bit, and I became the deputy editor in the other 6 every block is 6 years, and I became the editor-in-chief in 2019. And we show you the journal in a while. I think if you want to be interested in journal, there isn't a track for become an editor, because there is no formal faculty, class, training, programs, no school, and usually editors come from the field. If you have a neuroimmunology journal, a neuroimmunologist will drive a journal. If you are talking about intensive care people work about the journal, and only big journal help people working full-time. The JAMA, the Lancet, this kind of journal, New England have editors working full-time, but most of the journal don't have an editor working full-time. I work for the journal a couple of hours every day. And I think you take decision, a lot of them, you reject the paper. Before Alberto said this paper has been rejected, the editor is looking at novelty, at what is important for the community, needs to be understood by the community, does need to have any effect in a clinical field, the things we are publishing. For example, we put also, you are young, you love social media, we work a lot on graphics, images, we spend a lot of energy. I have 3 people only working on images and redrawing images. And another important point in this time is the time in which you receive the answer. If you submit a paper to New England and they are not well interested, they reject on the same day, but sometimes you enter in the JAMA track and the answer comes 3 or 4 months later. Alberto is patient, maybe he's happy to have this. We are intensive care people and we want to have an answer in a week, and we will show in a while. And the other point is that the people, the community, need to trust the editors because we are giving messages to everyone. My journal goes everywhere in the world. We have 5 million downloads a year of the article. All the article could be accessed for free from low-income countries. And we have a global reach. And so I need to be trusted by the community, and I need to be known that I take sound and even a difficult decision because they trust on me. And the other point is that we take a look at the world around us and we can make some direction. With editorials, with the selection of a paper I am publishing, I can give the direction of the community. If I want to push on something, now we are pushing on green or greener ICU, I start to push on the community, start thinking greener, start thinking about the environment, start thinking about the consumption in the intensive care, the waste in intensive care, and so I make a movement. The journal could make a movement. Big journal could make more global movement. I'm talking about intensive care. And some of us will spend a lot of time, but I think if you are interested in publishing in this work or directing your community, a journal is an important part. And you are young, I think you need to start as a reviewer, as I did. You need to take care of a paper under the help of an elder colleague. And I think analyzing the strength of the weakness of a paper and the novelty with older colleagues, you can understand also how to improve your research, how to communicate with your research, because when I was young, communication wasn't important. If the article, nobody was able to read it, nobody was caring. Now we have a structure you have to follow. You have key messages you have to report. You have something you have to do in your article. For example, you are summarizing the article with a visual abstract. In a single slide, there is everything. Doesn't mean that you don't have to read the article. Means that I give you the message very fast and you return back to reading the article because you are attracted by the article, interested by the article. This is the impact factor of the journal. I took the journal when the impact factor was 5, when I was a younger editor. Now the journal ranks around 20. This is the boost of COVID. We have 31.7 impact factor, but our impact factor without this drug, this this boost that I probably prefer not having because I don't like the COVID at all. I will stay around 20, that is a reasonable high impact factor for a specific journal because we deal only with intensive care paper. This is the response time. We give the first answer in 8 days. During the COVID time, I was managing 65 articles a day. I rejected most of them because it was rubbish. And the mean time at that day was 4.9 days for the answer. But we were so fast. For example, we published the first series of cases of COVID in one, intensive care COVID, was a letter because I had 4 revisions in a week with them. We guide them, and a letter for my journal is being quoted 4,000 of times, a letter. Usually a letter is quoted 3-4 times if you are lucky, 4,000 of times. Time is important. So we became the reference journal for the intensive. We developed an ICM style, and we increased the impact factor. But I think we need to move to improve the health and to improve the way the community is moving. So we are working also on global intensive care because we live in a rich part of the world, but most of the population even lives in a poor world without intensive care. We are discussing about the migraine ICU, another part, and this is only an example of the slide. Andrea, don't worry, I have only 2 slides. I saw he was looking at the watch and so on. So I want to give you my last word with some sentences. And I'm not, I don't want to influence you too much, but I think, as you saw, you can reach your satisfaction also with a strange path, and you need to follow your passion. And so I say, I think for you, you are young doctors, you need to keep your curiosity alive, otherwise you are dead. You are older than me if you don't have any curiosity. And the passion will guide you, and I think you need to be guided by your passion. I don't care which is your passion, but follow it. Be open to the opportunities, because there are plenty of opportunities. Stay connected to the others. Learn to be resilient, because you will fail a lot. You will think that what you are doing is the best thing you are doing, but the experiment doesn't work, the pathway doesn't exist. And, for example, I ran a lot of clinical trials in which we tested drugs that in the lab were fantastic, no effects on the patient. And so we don't have any cure. But we don't stop to think about mesenchymal, for example, mesenchymal stromal cell. These 4 points come from a colleague of mine, Deborah Cook from Canada. They give us a talk and say, probably you need to be brave, you need to be humble, you need to remain human, and I think the connection with the other is important. And the Virgilio program is part of this connection. Lend a hand every day to your colleagues, to young people, and to a worthy case. Okay, of course, thank you.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. I'm sure that I'm being definitely touched on the 2 perspectives that you have seen, which I think it was one of the reasons we have asked Professor Mantovani and Professor Citerio to be with us today, because I'm sure that you have appreciated, and I would like just to underline a few concepts. What I think is very important, and Alberto said, even in the time where you have the technology can driven totally the research question, I think it's very important to have a hypothesis-driven perspective, even by having tools that you might appreciate in research in the lab when you have met with some people, that you can fish without working hypothesis. And Alberto drove very well this concept, and as you have seen, in his path of career and development that was absolutely a strong route in a way. From the perspective of Giuseppe Citerio, I'm sure that being physician, or at least you will be a physician soon, the concept of unmet clinical need that of course can drive the way to think about modeling and try to explore even uncertainties, because we don't know whether mesenchymal stromal cell can really be useful for patients with brain injury. But at least there is all the rationale to pursue this topic. So I hope that you have enjoyed the morning. So now is the time for the EMPA General Assembly, or maybe just have a time for question and okay. So can we keep English or switch to Italian?
Both ways work.
Ok. Mi piacerebbe avere un vostro feedback, non della mattinata, perché questo ovviamente, ma dell'esperienza che state vivendo, dei problemi che cogliete e magari anche delle soluzioni, perché come il collega ha identificato l'errore, potete. I'm just asking whether they will have a time to share some in the program that they are basically enrolled. What are the problems? What are the challenges? What are the suggestions that I'm sure you might have? So I have the microphone with me, and I will just moving around. So, who want to start to say something? Then we will have the General Assembly. But this is time free for the Virgilio program, okay? I'm trying to switch from Italian to English, okay? Chi vuole cominciare? Problemi? Spero ne abbiate qualcuno, no? Ecco, no, stavo dicendo subito dottoressa, ma qui. E beh, io chiamo, speriamo. Se dite il nome, che anno siete, di che università, this I think is good.
Yes. I'll go in English because I think maybe some people don't speak Italian. I saw some. Yeah. I'm Sofia Francione. I'm a sixth-year medical student from the University of Milan. And yeah, first of all, thank you very much. It's been a really interesting morning, very inspirational as well. And I think my observation, also being here and maybe meeting for the first time many of my Virgilio colleagues, is really that we definitely lost a lot also due to COVID. And I'm really thankful we have this occasion to meet. And I really hope that, well, now I'm about to graduate, but I definitely hope that there will be more during this year. And maybe we can organize them expressly, so since we missed a lot of it. And also I hope that will be the case for the next generations. And yeah, thank you very much.
I have to say something which I believe is very important for the program. As I said before, Professor Mantovani was absolutely seminal on being on the board of the foundation that supported for the first 3 years the program. So I think it's very important that today is here, because I don't want to influence the decision of the board, but might be that it can, by having from your a positive feedback, even negative, because otherwise it's not truth, to help us for the future. Although the 3 university has already decided to bring the program and continue the program independent by the support that has been granted for the first 3 years. But just because he's here, and he's of course a leading person, as you know, as you have understood, please, positive and negative feedback.
Buongiorno. Allora, avrei una domanda in realtà per il professor Citerio prima. La prima è un po' per rompere il ghiaccio, visto che cucina, voglio sapere quale fosse il suo piatto forte. E poi la seconda è come differisce il suo lavoro di ricercatore in qualche modo da quello del professor Mantovani? Ha un laboratorio, come si articola? È Antonio Di Cristofano della Bicocca. Scusi.
Proviamo a raccogliere. I think we can collect some more questions. Please, name and where are you from?
I'm Laura, I'm from University of Milan, like Sofia. First, a comment about Virgilio, since you asked for feedback. Personally, for me, it's been an amazing experience so far. I've just finished my second rotation. I'm a fifth-year medical student, and as Professor Mantovani said, the methodology is really everything. Like, I've chosen 2 different labs that have 2 different topics, and I enjoyed them as much because the methodology was really important, how to move in a lab, very practical stuff, even understanding, seems obvious, the bureaucracy behind asking for a doctorate and all of that. I think it's fundamental. One thing I think it may be missing, I think this is also due to COVID, since we weren't able to really bond. It's fundamental to have a good mentor, but sometimes, and you can find a good mentor even talking with your peers and asking what experiences they had at the lab and with the mentor. And I think, at least I struggled a lot because I didn't feel like I had someone from upper years to talk to that easily because we didn't get to meet. So, and even if I was thinking, for example, to go to Humanitas, but I didn't know anyone from Humanitas to ask which labs were the best. So at the end, I ended up staying in UNIMIB because I had more people to ask for advice. Because many times, if the lab is very busy, you, of course, don't get to do as much as maybe you would in a lab that is less busy.
Please.
First of all, I would like to thank everyone for giving us this chance to follow the Virgilio program, like Prof. Andrea Biondi and Prof. Mantovani, Fondazione Cariplo, Richa, and a lot of people who were involved in this project. I would like first to start with not negative, but like with a critical pinpoint of the program was the fact that a lot of clinicians and doctors involved in the program sometimes are not really sensitized to the research topics. And I felt like that was something that is lacking from the clinical aspect, because if you interact with someone, a clinical person, figure, who does also research, then it actually understands what is it about. While if you happen to be in an environment where the research is not as common as it should be, because medicine is evidence-based. So it's something that it should be really good to improve and to sensitize also the doctors and their realities where the research is less performed. This is the point where I felt that it was lacking. For the rest, I mean, whenever I encountered a problem, I was always supported for these events by Richa and anyone here. So I always found solutions to the things that I thought I was lacking and missing. And at the end, like, the outcome was great, having had fulfilled experiences in different labs with different mentors, with different tutors, and so on. So I would like to thank everyone for making this real.
Well, I take the opportunity you mentioned, but I think that the engine of this program, I have to say, is Richa Lalla. And so I think it's really... I'm sure that if we will have a future, it's going to be granted to Richa and not to the... Any other comments? Oh, please. Sono un buon valletto, eh?
Thanks. So, hello everyone. I'm Juliette from France. I'm from the MD-PhD Association in France, and MD-PhD programs are quite well now installed in France with local and the national MD-PhD program, and we are super happy to see that it's also beginning to be developed in Italy and in other parts of the Europe and the world. And so thanks for the EMPA and the Virgilio program for this super interesting conference and for this program. And
yeah, comments. Giuseppe, che cosa cucini intanto? Perché I think the question was, what is the best dish that is preparing, being in the ICU, because...
Neurocucina.
Cucina.
Neurocucina. You need to think about the season, and I would like to propose you a risotto alla milanese con ossobuco, something like that.
Did you understand that? I hope that you enjoy this dish in Milano, risotto alla milanese e ossobuco.
And the question he was raising, for example, I don't have any lab, but I have colleagues in the lab. I found some research in the lab, and having connection is the key. Because I have a unit, I have a clinical department, but I have a lab in another place. For example, I was discussing with Alberto, the study we ran, we have sampled for 5,000 patients. We did analyze on biomarkers, genetics, and so on. But if we have a new idea, we have a biobank, now is in PEC in Hungary and in Cambridge, and we can analyze whatever we want if we have funding for doing it. So the connection and the relationship are the key.
Alberto, do you want to comment on this? Which are the differences between you as a medical and Giuseppe?
Yeah, I think that there are people, you can do research in different flavors. I mean, there are people like Andrea, who is both a clinician and a practicing clinician and a practicing researchers at various levels, his colleagues. And then there are people like me, I'm in the lab, but I have strong connections with the clinic. And then, so you have to find your own path. That is my point. If I can make a suggestion, it would be nice. I speak as Fondazione Cariplo, and I can say a word, but it would be nice if you could summarize some of the, because I think that some of the suggestions that came from here, namely assessment of mentorship and mentors, and as a request from the funding bodies, I think that is a very important, a key point, because, of course, mentorship is absolutely very, very important. So it would be nice to have a feedback to Fondazione CAI, perhaps